Just 2 days before I was supposed to get married, my fiancé's incredibly wealthy parents slid a prenuptial agreement across my kitchen table, their smiles so smug you'd think they just won a championship. What they didn't realize was that I was sitting on $8 million, had a notoriously tough lawyer, and had already cooked up a plan that would wipe those condescending grins right off their faces for good. Sign on this line, that line, and put your initials here. Eleanor Prescott placed the ridiculously fancy pen on my countertop with the same kind of calculated move you see in a chess match. 48 hours. That's all that was left until I was supposed to walk down the aisle and marry her son, Ethan. And she had chosen this specific moment just before 8 p.m. on a Thursday to show up at my apartment completely unannounced with her husband, Richard, and a 30-page document that was basically a financial trap. Ethan, of course, was suddenly impossible to reach, supposedly buried in last-minute work meetings that I was now pretty sure were as fake as Eleanor's syrupy sweet smile. She just watched me as I started to read the first few paragraphs, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a rhythm against her designer handbag. She was just savoring what she thought was my inevitable surrender. The agreement wasn't just a little one-sided. It was a calculated effort to completely erase me financially from any future I might share with Ethan. But what Eleanor didn't know, what she had never even bothered to look into in the 3 years she'd been treating me like some charity project her son had found, was that I had a cool $8 million of inherited money, a growing educational app company, and Boston's most feared attorney, Arthur Finch, just a phone call away. My hands didn't shake as I turned each page, even though my mind was a whirlwind, flashing back 5 years to the moment this secret fortune became my reality. My grandma Helen had spent her whole life in the same small house in Somerville, growing her own vegetables in the backyard and patching up old clothes instead of buying new ones. So when her lawyer, Arthur Finch, called me into his office after the funeral, I was expecting maybe a few $100s or some sentimental family jewelry. Instead, he slid a thick portfolio across his massive desk that felt like a scene from a movie. $8 million. It was a sum so huge it didn't seem real, built up over decades of smart, quiet investing, all hidden behind a life of thrift store sweaters and cutting coupons. Your grandmother started in 1965 with just a couple $100s she got from selling her wedding ring after your grandfather passed away, Arthur had told me, his voice filled with genuine admiration. She treated the stock market like it was her religion. She reinvested every single dividend, analyzed every stock. She lived as if she had nothing so that you, my dear, could have everything. She wanted to give you security, but more than that, she wanted to give you freedom. I left that office and just went back to my life like absolutely nothing had changed. My old Toyota still had a dent in the rear bumper from a minor fender bender. The faucet in my one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge still had to be jiggled just so to stop it from dripping. And my educational software company was still running out of a tiny rented office with furniture I'd bought secondhand. The only person who knew the truth was my sister, Megan, and even she had to look at the bank statements a few times before it sank in. That money became my secret weapon, helping me make decisions without anyone having a clue it was there. It meant I could say no to investors who wanted to take too much control of my company. It meant I could choose my relationships based on a real connection, not because I needed financial support. But most of all, it let me see who people really were when they thought I had nothing to offer but myself. That philosophy is what led me to the Prescott Foundation charity event 3 years ago. My company had donated some of our learning software to their literacy initiative, and my attendance was part of the deal. I was standing by the silent auction, trying to figure out how someone could ask $50,000 for what looked like a bunch of angry paint splatters on a canvas, when Ethan Prescott came up next to me. "I've been looking at that thing for about 10 minutes, he said, tilting his head, and I've decided that either I'm completely missing the point or we're all just pretending the emperor is actually wearing clothes. His honesty, in a room so full of fakes, completely disarmed me. We ended up talking for the next 2 hours right there by the auction table. He was genuinely curious about how my software worked, asking smart questions about adaptive learning algorithms. And I was shocked to find a trust fund kid who actually seemed to get it. He never once brought up his family's law firm or their massive real estate empire. He was just Ethan, a guy who was interested in technology that helped children learn. Our relationship grew from there, slow and natural. Coffee dates turned into lunches, which turned into dinners, which turned into spending whole weekends exploring Boston. He never picked restaurants that were out of my price range, never acted like I should drop everything for him, and never once made me feel like I was from the wrong side of the tracks. We had 3 years of Saturday mornings at the Haymarket, where he'd carry my bags of produce without a single complaint. 3 years of cooking disasters in my tiny kitchen that set off the smoke alarm and usually ended with us ordering pizza. 3 years of debates that went from serious topics like educational inequality to goofy arguments about whether a lobster roll should be served hot or cold. We never really talked about money. He didn't show off his family's wealth, and I didn't say a word about mine. We created this little bubble for ourselves where our connection was all that mattered, where his family name was just a name, and where my background didn't matter compared to our future. He proposed at our favorite spot, overlooking the Charles River, as the sun was setting. He didn't pull out some giant, flashy diamond meant to impress people. Instead, it was his grandmother's vintage ring, a beautiful, understated sapphire that had been through more than 60 years of marriage. "I know you could have an amazing life with or without me," he said, his hands shaking just a little. "I'm just really hoping you'll choose to have it with me." The wedding planning started out fine. We wanted something small and personal, maybe 60 or 70 people, focused on celebrating with the people we loved. We picked a date, found a little venue we both liked, and started making a simple guest list. But then, Eleanor Prescott swept in like a hurricane. "Darling," she'd said during our very first planning lunch, using an affectionate term that somehow felt like a criticism. "The Prescott family has a certain image to maintain. Our entire circle will be watching. This wedding isn't just about you and Ethan, it reflects on generations of our family's legacy." Every meeting after that was another invasion. The guest list ballooned to over 200. The small venue we loved was replaced by the grand ballroom at the Boston Harbor Hotel. The dress I picked was deemed sweet and was quickly overruled. The flowers I wanted were apparently uninspired. Ethan tried to stand up for me, but I saw him just shrink in his mother's presence, turning back into the little boy who had learned long ago that fighting her was just a fast track to exhaustion. Now, standing here in my kitchen, with their prenup ticking like a time bomb on my counter, I finally got it. The wedding, all of it, was just a lead-up to this moment. Every dismissive comment about my taste, every assumption that I couldn't afford their lifestyle, every little reminder of how generous they were being. It was all just setting the stage for this ambush. Richard cleared his throat, getting impatient. "We need to get this sorted out tonight, Clara. The wedding is in 2 days." I finally looked up from the document and met Eleanor's expectant eyes. They really thought they had me trapped. Too late to cancel the wedding without being humiliated, too close to the date to negotiate, too sudden to say no without looking like the gold digger they'd already decided I was. What they didn't know was that Grandma Helen's real gift wasn't just the money, it was the lesson that came with it. Real power isn't about what you show off, it's about what you keep hidden, waiting for just the right moment to play your hand. I carefully placed the prenup back on the counter, my fingers just brushing against the thick, expensive paper. My kitchen suddenly felt tiny with Richard and Eleanor Prescott in it, their very presence sucking all the air out of the room. I needed a minute to think, to really process what they were asking me to do. But Eleanor was already tapping her nails on her clutch, clearly waiting for me to just roll over and sign. The morning after Ethan proposed, the whole dynamic had changed. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Eleanor. Her voice was as sweet as honey, but you could feel the steel underneath. "Darling, we absolutely must talk about venues. I've gone ahead and scheduled a few appointments for us at the Fairmont Copley Plaza and the Four Seasons. They both have openings for next spring." I had mentioned the Arnold Arboretum, the place where Ethan and I had spent so many Sunday afternoons, where he'd first told me he loved me. Eleanor just let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, that place. It's charming, I suppose, but it's hardly suitable for our social circle. The Prescott name comes with certain standards. An outdoor wedding? Darling, what if it rains? What would the senator think? Or the partners from Richard's firm?" That one conversation pretty much set the tone for everything that followed. Every idea I had was met with this gentle, condescending smile. Every preference I expressed was brushed aside as being naive or not good enough. When I drove to their massive estate in Brookline to talk about the plans, I saw Eleanor's eyes scan my old Toyota with a look of barely hidden disgust. Inside their house, she watched me like I was a science experiment, noting my off-the-rack dress, my department store shoes, the way I paused for a second before picking up the right fork at dinner. About 3 months into our engagement, Richard finally showed his true colors. He invited Ethan and me to dinner at his private club, the kind of place where you have to be born into membership. The whole room smelled of old money and even older attitudes. Right between the soup and the main course, Richard started his little interrogation. "So Clara, this software company of yours, tell me, what are your profit margins?" He asked it like he was just making small talk, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. "We're doing well," I said, choosing my words carefully. "We've been profitable for the last 2 years. Real numbers, my dear. In the business world, we need specifics." His tone made it clear he doubted I knew anything about the real business world. "Our margins are strong for the edtech sector," I deflected, feeling more and more uncomfortable. He then moved on to my parents. "Both teachers," Ethan tells me. "Public school, yes. My mother teaches 2nd grade and my father teaches high school English." "A noble profession," Richard said, in a way that made it sound like the exact opposite. "Though I'm sure the financial side of things must have been difficult growing up. Your student loans must be quite a burden." Ethan shifted in his seat beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. "Dad, I don't think. I'm just getting to know your fiancé, son. That's perfectly normal." Richard kept up his questions for 3 more courses, trying to pull information out of me about my rent, my car payments, even my credit score, all through these cleverly disguised questions. I dodged as best I could, but he was a master at this kind of thing. What I didn't tell him was that I had paid off my student loans in full the day after I got my inheritance from Grandma Helen, that my credit score was perfect, that I could have bought a house with cash but chose to rent because I liked the flexibility. He was busy building this profile of me as a struggling entrepreneur from a working-class background, someone who desperately needed the Prescott family more than they needed me. The fight over the guest list was the most telling. Ethan and I had made our list together, 60 people who we actually cared about. My friends from college, his friends from law school, our families, and the colleagues who had become our real friends. Eleanor took one look at it and pulled out her own list. "I've taken the liberty of adding a few essential names," she said, handing me 3 pages of typed names. There were 75 extra people, and I didn't recognize a single one. "Eleanor, I don't know any of these people." "Well, of course you don't, dear. They're Richard's business partners, members of our club, people who expect an invitation to a Prescott family event. Your little company friends are sweet, I'm sure, but a wedding of this stature requires a certain caliber of guest." The way she said little company friends made me clench my jaw. These were brilliant software engineers, dedicated educators, people who were actually changing the world. But to Eleanor, they were nobodies because they didn't have a summer house on the Cape or a family name on a building at Harvard. "Maybe we could compromise," I suggested. "Add 20 of your most important people." Her smile was as sharp as a knife. "Clara, you need to understand something. When you marry Ethan, you're not just marrying him. You are marrying into the Prescott family. Our reputation, our connections, our social standing, they all become yours. But that kind of privilege comes with responsibilities. Ethan tried to jump in, but Eleanor silenced him with a single look, a look I'd seen before. It was the one that reminded him who held the purse strings to the family trust fund, who could make his life very comfortable or very, very difficult. It was during my wedding dress fitting that my sister Megan finally said what I'd been trying to ignore. Eleanor had insisted on coming along, even though I had only invited Megan and my best friend Amy. She circled me while I stood on the little platform, looking at the simple, elegant dress I had fallen in love with. "It's very simple," she finally said. "Don't you think a Prescott bride should make more of a statement? I know a designer who could whip up something more appropriate." After she left, Megan pulled me into the coffee shop next door. Her face was serious. "Clara, I have to say something, and you're not going to like it." "Megan, no, just listen. I've been watching this whole thing for months. Eleanor is establishing her dominance. Every little criticism, every suggestion, every single time she dismisses what you want, she's just training you to give in. She's testing you to see how far you'll bend before you break." I wanted to tell her she was overreacting, but the words just wouldn't come out, because deep down, I knew she was right. "I've seen this before," Megan went on. "My friend from work, you remember Jessica? Her in-laws did the exact same thing. It started with the wedding, then it was about where they should live, how they should raise their kids, every single major life decision. By the time she realized what was happening, she had completely lost herself." "Ethan isn't like that," I said, but I could hear the doubt in my own voice. "Maybe he's not, but he's not standing up to them either, is he? When Eleanor dismisses your choices, where is he? When Richard questions you like you're applying for a loan, what does Ethan do?" She was right, and I knew it. Ethan would squeeze my hand under the table. He'd apologize to me in private later. He'd promise me that things would be different once we were married. But when it really counted, when his parents were actively putting me down, he just retreated into being the compliant son they had raised him to be. Megan grabbed my hand. "You are a brilliant woman, Clara. You built a company from the ground up. You don't need their approval or their money or their connections. Please just be careful. Please remember who you are." And now, standing in my kitchen with Richard checking his watch and Eleanor's smug smile getting wider by the second, Megan's words were ringing in my ears. They had been building up to this moment for months, with every little surrender preparing me for this final, ultimate defeat. They had sized me up, put me in a box, and decided I was someone they could control. They had no idea how wrong they were. I looked up from the counter where the prenup lay like a declaration of war. Eleanor's perfectly lipsticked mouth curved into an even wider smile as she watched me trying to process what they were demanding. Richard had moved a little closer, creating a subtle U-shape that made my small kitchen feel like a cage. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept my face completely blank, drawing on every lesson Grandma Helen had ever taught me about not showing your hand too early. "I need to read this carefully," I said, picking up the stack of papers. My hands were steady, even though a storm of rage was building inside me. "Surely you understand that legal documents need to be reviewed properly." Eleanor's laugh was light, but it was laced with poison. "Oh, there's really nothing to it, dear. Just standard protections that any family with significant means would insist upon. I signed a similar one when I married Richard 35 years ago. But as I flipped through the pages, my eye caught details that made my stomach clench. This wasn't about protection. This was about total financial annihilation, all wrapped up in legal jargon. The document stated that any assets we acquired during the marriage would belong solely to Ethan. Any business I started or grew could fall under a clause that might give the Prescott family a claim to my intellectual property. There was even a clause about my social media and public appearances that would basically require me to get their permission before I said or did anything in public that could impact the Prescott family reputation. "This clause right here," I said, pointing to a particularly nasty section, suggests that any technology or educational software I develop during our marriage could be subject to Prescott family oversight. That would affect my existing company. Richard just waved his hand dismissively. "Only if you use marital resources or time to develop it. Surely you don't plan on neglecting your husband for your little hobby business." The way he said hobby business made me want to scream. My company had contracts with school districts across the state and had helped thousands of students improve their literacy. But to him, it was just a hobby because it didn't make the kind of money he considered real. "I'll need my lawyer to review this," I said, my voice firm as I closed the document. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Eleanor's smile vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. "That won't be necessary. We need this signed tonight. The wedding is in 2 days. "Exactly, which is why this needs to be handled now," Richard said, his tone shifting from condescending to threatening. "We've put a considerable amount of money into this wedding. The hotel, the flowers, the catering. $100,000 to be precise. But we're fully prepared to cancel the entire thing if we have to." The number was supposed to shock me, to make me feel guilty about the money they'd spent. What they didn't know was that $100,000 was less than what my investment portfolio earned in a good month. "You're giving me an ultimatum?" I asked, wanting to be crystal clear about what was happening. Eleanor pulled a fancy pen from her handbag and set it on the counter next to the document with a dramatic flourish. "We're giving you a choice, Clara. Sign the agreement right now, or we will call the hotel in the next hour and cancel everything. You can be the one to explain to 200 guests why the wedding is suddenly off." "And Ethan? What does he have to say about this?" Richard and Eleanor shared a look that told me everything I needed to know. "Ethan understands his family obligations," Richard said carefully. "He knows that protecting the Prescott legacy is what's most important. So he knows you're here, giving me this ultimatum 2 days before our wedding?" "Ethan is in meetings," Eleanor said smoothly. Too smoothly. This was too important to wait for him. I pulled out my phone. "Then you won't mind if I call him. He can't be disturbed during these meetings," Richard said, a little too quickly. "You know how these things are." I dialed anyway. The phone rang once and then went straight to voicemail. Someone had declined the call. I tried again. Same thing. On the third try, Ethan's assistant, Jessica, answered. "Hi, Jessica. I need to speak to Ethan urgently. I'm so sorry, Ms. Hayes, but Mr. Prescott is in meetings all evening and can't be disturbed." But behind Jessica's professional voice, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was the unmistakable sound of a busy restaurant, clinking glasses, muffled chatter, someone laughing loudly. Ethan wasn't in meetings. He was out to dinner somewhere while his parents were ambushing me in my own home. "Thank you, Jessica," I said, and ended the call. I looked at Richard and Eleanor, really looked at them. They were standing in my kitchen like they had just conquered a new territory, completely sure of their victory. They had planned this whole thing, the timing, Ethan being out of reach, the pressure of the wedding. They had sized me up and decided I was someone with no resources, no options, and no power. Someone who would just fall apart when faced with the shame of a canceled wedding. "You need to leave," I said, my voice quiet. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me? Get out of my apartment. Now." Richard's face turned red. "Now you listen here, young lady. No, you listen." I picked up the prenup and held it up. "You came into my home without an invitation, tried to bully me into signing away my rights, and you did it while making sure your son couldn't get in the way. This isn't a negotiation, it's a trap, and I don't do well with traps. If you don't sign this tonight, there will be no wedding," Richard growled. "Then that's a choice you're making," I replied, surprised by how calm I sounded when my insides were screaming. "You're choosing to cancel your son's wedding because I refused to sign a legal document without having my lawyer look at it. You can explain that to your 200 guests." Eleanor stepped closer, her expensive perfume filling the small space. "You are making a huge mistake. Do you really think Ethan will choose you over his family, over his inheritance, over everything he's ever known?" The question just hung there in the air like a guillotine. It was the same question I'd been avoiding for months, the one that would creep into my mind in quiet moments when Ethan didn't defend me against his mother's little cruelties or his father's put-downs. "I guess we're about to find out," I said, holding her gaze. Richard picked up the pen Eleanor had put on the counter and held it out to me one last time. "Last chance, Clara. Sign it, have your fairy tale wedding, and everyone goes home happy. Refuse, and by tomorrow morning, every single person on that guest list will know you refuse to sign a simple prenuptial agreement. What do you think they'll assume about your motives?" It was a masterful move, threatening not just the wedding, but my reputation. In their world, refusing a prenup would brand me as the exact gold digger they always thought I was. They expected me to crumble. Instead, I walked to my front door and opened it. "Get out." They left, but Eleanor turned back at the door. "You have until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. If we don't have your signature by then, I will personally call every guest and every vendor. And Clara, when Ethan has to choose between you and everything else in his life, just remember that you're the one who forced him to make that choice." The door clicked shut behind them, and it sounded like the end of everything I had built with Ethan. I stood there for a second, my hand still on the doorknob, feeling the weight of what just happened. Then I walked over to my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in years. Arthur Finch answered on the second ring. "Clara, what a pleasant surprise. Arthur, I need you. Tonight. The Prescott family just tried to ambush me with a prenup 2 days before my wedding." There was a short pause, and then Arthur's voice turned sharp as a razor. "I'll be there in an hour. And Clara, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and write down everything you remember about that conversation right now, while it's fresh." I hung up with Arthur and immediately opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I documented every single detail of the Prescott's ambush, while their words were still burning in my mind. The way Eleanor had smiled as she watched me read their financial death warrant. Richard's dismissive tone when he called my company a hobby. The perfectly calculated timing of Ethan's disappearance. Every detail was crucial now. 45 minutes later, Arthur Finch was standing in my doorway, his old leather briefcase in one hand and a legal pad in the other. At 75, he still moved with the focused energy of a man who had spent his life dismantling corporate bullies and predatory contracts. His gray suit was perfect, even at this late hour, and his silver hair was neatly combed. "Show me the document," he said without any preamble, as he settled himself at my dining table and put on his reading glasses. I handed him the prenup and then poured us both some coffee while he read. The only sounds in my apartment were the rustle of pages and Arthur's occasional sharp sigh as he came across particularly awful clauses. His expression got darker with every page he turned. After about 20 minutes, he finally put the document down and took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. In my 50 years of practicing law, I have seen some truly predatory agreements. This isn't just predatory, Clara. This is financial imprisonment disguised as a legal document. Can they actually enforce it if I sign? Oh, it would be legally binding, though a few of these clauses might not hold up in court. But that's not the point. The point is, they aren't trying to protect their assets. They're trying to establish ownership over you. Look at this intellectual property clause. Any educational software you develop during the marriage could be claimed as marital property, subject to the Prescott family's interests. Your current company could be at risk. Arthur pulled out his legal pad and started making notes in his neat, precise handwriting. They've made a huge mistake, though. They've shown their entire hand, and they've done it too early and too aggressively. Now tell me about your financial situation. Every last detail. I got my files out of the safe in my bedroom. investment statements, the valuation of my company, the documents for the 2 rental properties I'd bought with some of my grandmother's inheritance. Arthur went through every document methodically, occasionally making a note or asking a question. $8.2 million in liquid assets and investments, he summarized. Another $2 million in company valuation, though that's not as liquid. Real estate worth about $900,000. Your total net worth is approaching $11 million. He looked up at me over his glasses. And the Prescott family has no idea about any of this? None. I've been extremely careful. My credit cards have modest limits. I drive an old Toyota. I live here. I gestured around my small apartment. Even Ethan just knows that I run a small tech company. Arthur leaned back in his chair, and a slow, sly smile spread across his face. They have severely miscalculated. Now we're going to draft our response. Not just a counteroffer, but a complete and total reversal of their little power play. We worked side by side, with Arthur drafting the legal language while I gave him financial details and context about my business. The new prenup we created was the exact opposite of theirs. It was balanced, fair, and protected both of our assets and future earnings. It included specific provisions for my intellectual property that would prevent any claim on my company. It specified that all inherited assets would remain separate property. Arthur even added a clause about family business interference, which he seemed particularly pleased with. "This section right here," he said, pointing to a paragraph near the end, "prevents either party's family from exerting undue influence on marital decisions. If they want to play the prenup game, we'll make sure the rules apply to everyone." By 11:30, we had a finished document. Arthur called in a favor and had it professionally formatted and bound. A courier showed up just before midnight to deliver the final product. It looked just as official and intimidating as the document the Prescotts had brought me. The apartment door opened without a knock. Only my sister, Megan, had that privilege. She walked in carrying bags of Thai food and a bottle of wine, taking in the scene of me and Arthur surrounded by legal papers and financial statements. "I figured you'd need backup," she said, unpacking containers of pad thai and curry, "and probably someone to talk you out of any crazy revenge schemes." "Too late for that," I said, showing her our counter proposal. Megan read through it while eating straight out of a container, her expression changing from worried to impressed. "This is brilliant. You're not just defending yourself, you're going on the offensive." "The best defense always is," Arthur said, accepting a plate of food from Megan with a grandfatherly smile. "Are you really ready to reveal everything?" Megan asked me. "The inheritance, the company's value, all of it. Once you put that out there, you can't take it back." I had been wrestling with that all night. For years, I had felt safe being financially invisible, being valued for myself instead of my bank account. But the Prescotts had forced my hand. They tried to financially cripple me because they thought I was powerless. I said, "They need to understand exactly who they were trying to manipulate." Megan squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you. Most people would have either signed out of fear or just exploded with anger. You're not doing either. You're being strategic." "Grandma Helen would approve," I said, thinking about how my grandmother had quietly built a fortune while everyone thought she was just a frugal old woman. Arthur started packing his briefcase. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be intense. The Prescotts are not going to take this counterattack lying down." After he left, Megan helped me clean up. "Have you heard from Ethan?" "Not a word. His phone has been off ever since his parents' visit." "That says a lot," Megan said quietly. "I know." The silence from Ethan felt like its own kind of betrayal. Either he knew about the ambush and was a part of it, or he was too weak to even check on me after his parents' attack. Neither option looked good for our future. Megan stayed until almost 2 in the morning, and her presence was a comfort as doubt and anger fought for control in my mind. Before she left, she gave me a tight hug. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you're doing the right thing. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small just so they can feel big." I couldn't sleep after she left. Instead, I sat at my laptop and wrote the message I would send to Ethan at sunrise. It had to be carefully worded, cold enough to show my anger, but vague enough not to give away my plans. I wanted to see his real reaction, not some performance his parents had coached him on. At 5:45 a.m., I sent the text, "Mama Maria's, noon, we need to talk." His reply came almost instantly, which told me he hadn't been sleeping either. Of course. Is everything okay? I didn't answer. Let him wonder. Let him worry. In 6 hours, I would know if the man I was supposed to marry would stand with me or fold under his family's pressure. The new prenup and all my financial statements sat in my briefcase by the door, ready. The counterattack was prepared. Now I just had to find out if I was deploying it against 3 people or 2. The morning dragged on. I showered and dressed in a navy blue dress that made me feel confident, and I arrived at Mama Maria's 15 minutes early. The restaurant was filled with memories of Ethan and me sharing pasta and talking about our future. Now it would either be the site of our reconciliation or the place where everything we had built fell apart. I picked a table in the corner where I could see the door, ordered a bottle of sparkling water, and waited. My briefcase sat on the chair next to me, holding the documents that would either save or destroy my relationship. The lunch crowd started to arrive, and the familiar sounds of conversation and silverware clinking felt like a strange contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Ethan walked in at exactly noon, and my breath caught in my throat. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled, his tie was crooked, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he had aged a decade overnight. When he saw me, a look of desperation flashed across his face before he quickly composed himself and walked over. He sat down heavily, not even trying to kiss me on the cheek like he usually did. "Clara, before you say a single word, I need you to know that I had no idea what my parents were planning. When I got home last night and they told me what they did, I completely lost it. We had the worst fight of our lives. And yet you were conveniently in meetings last night," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Meetings that sounded a lot like a restaurant when Jessica answered your phone." His face just crumbled. "They told me it was important for me to stay away, that it was family business that needed to be handled delicately. I thought they were just going to talk to you about wedding details, maybe go over some family traditions. I never ever imagined they would ambush you with a prenup, especially not one like that. But you knew they wanted a prenup." "Yes," he admitted, his shoulders slumping. "They've been pushing for one ever since we got engaged. I kept telling them I would handle it, that we would talk about it together like adults. I wanted to wait until after the wedding, to deal with it calmly without all this pressure. They agreed, or at least I thought they did." The waiter came over, but I just waved him away. This conversation couldn't be interrupted. "They threatened to disinherit me," Ethan went on, his voice raw. "Not just from the trust fund, but from the family, from the firm, from everything. And you know what? I told them to do it. I told them if forcing you to sign that document was the price of their money, they could keep every last penny." He reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled it back. "Not yet. There was too much left to say. Ethan, I need to show you something." I pulled out my phone and opened my investment portfolio summary, then slid it across the table. He looked at the screen, his face filled with confusion. Then his eyes focused on the numbers, and I watched all the color drain from his face. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He looked from the phone to me and back to the phone. "This can't be $8 million? $8.2 million in liquid investments," I corrected. "Another $2 million in my company's valuation, and about $900,000 in rental properties. My grandmother left me more than just memories when she passed away." Ethan just stared at the screen as if it might suddenly make sense. "You've had almost $11 million this entire time? While my mother was making sarcastic comments about your apartment? While my father was interrogating you about your financial stability? While they were treating you like some fortune hunter trying to marry up? Every condescending smile, every patronizing comment about my little company, every suggestion that I was lucky to be marrying into the Prescott family. I just let the weight of it all hang in the air between us. I sat through all of it, knowing that I could have bought my way into their precious country club 10 times over. His hand was trembling as he pushed my phone back to me. "Why didn't you tell me? We've been together for 3 years, Clara." "For the same reason you don't introduce yourself by mentioning your trust fund," I said. "I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted something real, something that wasn't about money or status or family names. I thought that's what we had." Ethan was quiet for a long time, just processing everything. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed to something I didn't expect. It was a mix of awe and understanding, maybe even pride. "You let them show you exactly who they are," he said slowly. "My parents, with all their talk about class and good breeding and the right background, they showed you their absolute worst selves because they thought you were powerless, and the whole time, you had more liquid cash than I do." A laugh escaped him, bitter and sharp. "Do you know what the irony is? They've been so worried about protecting the family money from you, and all along you could have been protecting your money from us. God, when they find out, they're going to find out this afternoon," I said, pulling the new prenup from my briefcase. "Arthur Finch and I drafted this last night. It's fair, it's balanced, and it protects both of us equally, including my assets and my intellectual property." Ethan took the document and started scanning through it with his lawyer's eye. I watched him read, and I saw his expression shift from professional curiosity to genuine surprise. This is completely reasonable, more than reasonable. It's generous considering what you're bringing into this marriage." He looked up at me. "This makes their document look like what it is, a financial assault. The question is, Ethan, where do you stand? Because at 3 o'clock today, I'm meeting your parents at the Union Club. I'm going to present this counteroffer and reveal exactly who they tried to intimidate. But I need to know, are you standing with me or are you standing between us?" He put the document down and leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Clara, I need you to understand something. I have spent 32 years of my life under their control. 32 years of being managed and directed and shaped into what they thought a Prescott heir should be. Every major decision, every relationship, every choice has been filtered through their approval. Even this, even loving you, became something they had to control." His voice got stronger. "But what they did yesterday, what they tried to do to you, it finally broke something inside me. Or maybe it fixed something that had been broken for a long time. I don't want their money if it comes with strings that strangle everyone I love. I don't want their approval if it means treating people like assets to be managed." He reached for my hand again, and this time, I let him take it. "I am not standing between you and them. I am standing with you, facing them, as equals, as partners. The way it should have been all along. The relief that washed over me was so overwhelming I could barely breathe. You understand what this means, right? They might actually follow through on their threats. The disinheritance, the firm, all of it. Then I'll build my own career, with someone who sees me as more than just the Prescott name." His grip on my hand tightened. "Tell me the plan. What happens at 3? I laid out Arthur's strategy. Present the counteroffer, reveal my financial position, and establish new boundaries for our marriage and their involvement in it." Ethan listened, nodding occasionally, his expression hardening. "They are going to be completely blindsided," he said. "My mother especially. She has built her entire idea of you on the assumption that you need us more than we need you. The Union Club, 3 o'clock. Arthur will be there as my legal counsel. Are you ready for this?" Ethan's jaw was set with a determination I had never seen in him before. "They have controlled me my entire life, Clara. They've used money and family duty like a leash. That ends today." We left the restaurant separately. Ethan went home to change into his best suit, and I went back to my apartment to get the documents and prepare myself for what was about to happen. Arthur was already waiting in the lobby of the Union Club when I got there at 2:45. He had a presence that just commanded respect, and the staff clearly knew who he was. "Ready for battle?" he asked quietly, adjusting his glasses. As ready as anyone can be to dismantle their future in-laws' entire sense of superiority, I replied, clutching my briefcase. The Union Club was the very definition of old Boston money. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs that had held powerful men for generations, and oil paintings of long-dead industrialists staring down from their frames. I had picked this place on purpose because here, the Prescott name was just one among many. They couldn't throw their weight around as easily as they could at their own club. Ethan arrived at 2:55, looking completely transformed from the broken man I had seen at lunch. His suit was perfectly pressed, his posture was straight, and his face was set with a determination I had rarely seen. He kissed my cheek and whispered, "Together," before taking his seat next to me. We arranged ourselves strategically at the table in the private room. Arthur on my right, Ethan on my left, our documents laid out in front of us like ammunition. We were a united front, and it was deliberate. This wasn't a family chat. It was a negotiation. At 3:15, Eleanor and Richard Prescott arrived, 15 minutes late, their usual power move to establish dominance. They walked in expecting to find me sitting there anxiously checking my watch, worried about their disapproval. Instead, they found the three of us deep in conversation about a contract clause, and we barely even glanced up when they came in. "We don't have a lot of time," Richard announced, pulling out a chair with more force than was necessary. "The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow, and this needs to be settled." Eleanor sat down next to him, her designer jacket immaculate, her expression already radiating disapproval. "I assume you've come to your senses, Clara. The wedding is tomorrow. Surely you don't want to create any unnecessary drama." I looked up from the document I was reviewing with Arthur and met her gaze. "There won't be any drama if we can reach a reasonable agreement." "The agreement was already presented," Richard said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You just need to sign it." "Actually," I said, sliding our counter-proposal across the polished table, "we're here to discuss terms. Your document was unacceptable. This is our alternative." Eleanor's face flushed. "This is not a negotiation. You sign our agreement or what?" Ethan's voice cut through the room like a shard of glass. "You'll cancel the wedding." "Go ahead, Mother. I will personally call every single guest tonight and explain exactly why. That my parents tried to financially abuse my fiancé 2 days before our wedding. The shock on their faces was incredible. Eleanor actually flinched as if Ethan had hit her. Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. In 32 years, they had never heard their son speak to them with such authority. "Ethan," Eleanor began, her voice trembling slightly, "you don't understand the implications." "I understand perfectly," Ethan interrupted. "You ambushed Clara in her own home. You tried to force her to sign away her rights without a lawyer. You attempted to establish financial control over our marriage before it even started. I understand exactly what you did." Richard recovered first, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "This is about protecting family assets, nothing more." "Then you should be relieved to know that Clara has significant assets of her own to protect," Arthur interjected smoothly. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out the financial statements, and placed them on the table with deliberate precision. The papers landed with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Before you dismiss our counter-proposal," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was racing, "there's something you should know about the person you've been trying to intimidate." Richard reached for the papers with the confidence of a man used to reviewing financial documents. That confidence vanished as his eyes scanned the first page. His hand actually trembled as he turned to the second page, and then the third. Eleanor leaned over, trying to read over his shoulder, her perfectly composed face cracking like old porcelain. "This is..." Richard started, then stopped, then started again. This can't be accurate. Every cent is documented and verified, Arthur said with satisfaction. Investment accounts, property holdings, company valuation. Ms. Hayes's net worth is approximately $11 million, and it has been for the entire time she has been in a relationship with your son. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. It was a first. She looked from the documents to me, to Ethan, and back to the documents, as if hoping they might magically rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Richard set the papers down with exaggerated care. His face had gone from red to pale to a sickly gray. "You've had $11 million, Rebecca finally managed to whisper. "This entire time, while you treated me like a gold digger, I finished for her. While you made snide comments about my apartment and my car. While you interrogated me about my parents' teaching salaries and assumed I couldn't afford a proper wedding dress. Yes, I had $11 million through all of that." Eleanor's hands flew to her throat, her fingers nervously twisting her pearl necklace. "You could have told us. We would have treated me differently." I cut her off. "That is exactly why I didn't tell you. I wanted to see who you really were, how you treat people you think are beneath you. And now, I know." "This changes things," Richard said slowly, his mind clearly racing to recalculate every interaction we'd ever had. "No," Ethan said firmly, "it doesn't change a thing. It only reveals what was always true, that you judged Clara based on your assumptions, not on who she actually is. The money doesn't make her more worthy of your respect. It just exposes how unworthy your disrespect always was." Eleanor looked at her son as if she was seeing him for the first time. "Ethan, we were just trying to protect you." "From what? From marrying a successful, independently wealthy woman who loved me without knowing about my trust fund? Yes, what a terrible fate you were saving me from." Arthur cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand. The counter-proposal Ms. Hayes and I have prepared is eminently fair. It protects both parties' assets equally, includes provisions for intellectual property, and establishes clear boundaries for family involvement in marital decisions." Richard picked up our prenup, his movement stiff and mechanical. He started reading, his professional instincts taking over despite his shock. Eleanor just sat there, frozen, staring at me, as if I had morphed into a different person entirely. The power dynamic in the room had completely flipped. The people who had walked in expecting me to surrender were now facing equals. No, they were facing people who had completely outplayed them. Their carefully planned ambush had become their own public humiliation. Richard put down our prenup after reading it through twice. His expression was impossible to read. Eleanor remained frozen, her fingers still clutching her pearls as if they were a lifeline to a world she understood. The old clock in the corner ticked away the seconds, each one feeling like an hour. "This agreement," Richard finally said, his voice measured and professional, "is actually more favorable to Ethan than our proposal was to Clara." "That's the point," Arthur responded coolly. "A marriage is a partnership, not a hostile takeover." Richard's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and stepped away from the table, speaking in hushed, angry tones to someone on the other end, undoubtedly his legal team. Eleanor watched her husband with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Uncertainty. "I need some air," she announced suddenly, standing up with less than her usual grace. She walked over to the window that overlooked the Boston Common, her back to us, her shoulders rigid. Ethan reached for my hand under the table. His palm was steady and warm, a silent reassurance. We waited in silence as Richard made 3 separate phone calls, each one more heated than the last. I caught bits and pieces. "No, it's not a bluff. That's not acceptable." And finally, "I don't care what Thompson thinks. Just find another way." After 20 minutes, Richard returned to the table. "My legal team wants to make several modifications." "No modifications. Arthur said simply. "The agreement is more than fair. You can sign it as it is, or we walk away. You're giving us an ultimatum?" Richard's voice was filled with disbelief, as if the whole world had just turned upside down. "The same ultimatum you gave Clara," Ethan said quietly, "except we're giving you 18 hours to decide, not 2. Rebecca turned from the window. Her face had lost its usual perfect composure, revealing something raw underneath. "Why?" she asked, looking right at me. "Why would you hide this from us?" The question hung in the air. I could have given her the easy answer, that it was none of their business, that my finances were private, but something in her expression, a crack in the mask she'd worn for 3 years, made me choose honesty. My grandmother lived her entire life being judged for not having enough, I said. She was brilliant, strategic, and incredibly patient, and everyone dismissed her as just another working-class woman who clipped coupons. When she left me her fortune, she also left me a lesson. Money doesn't reveal character, it conceals it. People show you who they really are when they think you have nothing they want. Eleanor flinched as if I had slapped her. She slowly returned to her seat, looking years older. "We'll need time to review this properly," Richard said, though his voice had lost all of its earlier authority. "You have until noon tomorrow," Arthur replied. "The wedding is at 4. That should be plenty of time for you to make a decision." We left them sitting at that polished table, their entire world turned upside down. In the elevator, Ethan pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could feel his heart pounding. "You were magnificent," he whispered into my hair. That evening, Arthur called me 3 times with updates. The Prescott's legal team had tried to negotiate changes to our terms. Each time, Arthur had given them the same message. "The agreement stands as written. Sign it or cancel the wedding." Ethan spent the night at his own apartment. We had decided to honor at least one wedding tradition. But he called me at midnight, his voice exhausted. "They're fighting," he said. "I can hear them from my old room. Mom is accusing Dad of failing to do his due diligence. Dad is blaming her for making assumptions based on appearances. They've been at it for hours. Are you okay?" I asked, knowing how hard this must be for him. "Actually, yes," he said, and I could hear the surprise in his own voice. "For the first time in my life, their anger isn't my problem to fix. Their mistakes aren't my burden to carry. It's liberating." I barely slept that night, my mind alternating between confidence in what we had done and anxiety about what the morning would bring. Megan stayed with me, making tea and trying to distract me, but we both knew all we could do was wait. At exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, my wedding day, the doorbell rang. A courier stood there with an envelope bearing the Prescott family seal. My hands shook a little as I signed for it and closed the door. Inside was our prenuptial agreement, signed by both Richard and Eleanor Prescott, properly witnessed and notarized. A handwritten note was clipped to the front in Richard's neat script. "Ms. Hayes, or should I say, soon-to-be Mrs. Prescott, you have proven yourself to be a more formidable opponent than we anticipated. Perhaps that is exactly what Ethan needs, and what this family needs. We look forward to welcoming you properly. Richard Prescott." There was no note from Eleanor. Her signature on the document was the only communication she offered, surrender delivered in elegant cursive. Megan read the note over my shoulder and laughed. "Look forward to welcoming you properly. After 3 years of treating you like dirt." But I understood what the note really meant. It was an admission of defeat, yes, but it was also a recognition of my equality. I had forced them to see me not as the woman they had imagined, but as the woman I actually was. 3 hours later, as my mother helped me with my wedding dress and Megan fixed my veil, there was a soft knock at the door of the bridal suite. My father answered it, and I heard Eleanor's voice, quieter than I had ever heard it. "May I have a moment with Clara?" My mother and Megan exchanged a look, but I just nodded. They stepped out, leaving Eleanor and me alone for the first time since the ambush in my kitchen. She was holding a small velvet jewelry box with an unusual hesitancy. The armor of designer clothes and imperial confidence was gone. She looked vulnerable, almost fragile. "These belong to Richard's grandmother," she said, opening the box to reveal a pair of antique sapphire earrings. Margaret Prescott. She was a seamstress who married Richard's grandfather in 1925 against every one of his family's objections. They called her a fortune hunter, said she'd trapped him. During the Great Depression, when the family business was about to go under, she sold all of her jewelry, except for these, and used the money she had saved from years of sewing to keep the company afloat. She saved the Prescott legacy. Eleanor held the box out to me. "I think she would have appreciated you. Someone who understands that true worth isn't always what's on the surface." It was the closest I would ever get to an apology from Eleanor Prescott, and somehow it was enough. I took the earrings, removing the simple pearls I had planned to wear and replacing them with Margaret Prescott's sapphires. "Thank you," I said simply. Eleanor nodded, straightening her shoulders as if she was putting her armor back on. I should go. But Clara... She paused at the door. "Welcome to the family. Truly this time." The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone with my reflection. The sapphire earrings caught the light, their deep blue holding decades of history. A seamstress who had saved an empire, now passing her strength to another woman who refused to be small. Megan and my mother came back in, their faces curious but respectful. "Ready to get married?" Megan asked, smoothing a wrinkle on my dress. "More than ready," I said, and I meant it. The real battle had already been won. Walking down the aisle of the hotel ballroom, I noticed how everything had changed. The guests who had once looked right through me now watched with an intense interest. Richard stood with the groomsmen and gave me a nod of genuine respect. Eleanor sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, wearing an expression I had never seen on her before, something that looked like humility. And Ethan was waiting for me at the altar, his face transformed with an emotion that took my breath away. It wasn't just love, it was liberation. We had both been set free by the truth, and now we could build something real on that foundation. The ceremony was a blur of traditional vows that now had a new meaning. When Ethan promised to honor and cherish me, his voice carried the weight of a man who had already proven those words. When I promised to stand by him, we both knew I already had. At the reception, the real change became clear. During the cocktail hour, Richard approached me while Ethan was talking with friends. He had 2 glasses of champagne and offered one to me with an expression of real curiosity. "I've been reviewing your investment portfolio," he said without any small talk. "The diversification strategy is impressive. Did your grandmother design it or have you modified it?" "Both," I replied, taking the champagne. "She built the foundation, but I've adjusted it based on market conditions. Technology, especially ed tech, is undervalued right now." Richard leaned in, his voice low. "I have a client looking to invest in that sector. Would you be willing to discuss your insights? Not now, of course, but perhaps lunch next week?" The man who had tried to financially dominate me 48 hours ago was now asking for my professional advice. The reversal was so complete it felt unreal. "I'll have my assistant call yours," I said, matching his professional tone. During dinner, Eleanor had her own transformation. The governor's wife came to our table to offer congratulations, and Eleanor stood up, placing a hand on my shoulder with surprising warmth. "Mrs. Morrison, let me introduce you to my daughter-in-law, Clara. She's the brilliant mind behind Innovate Learning Solutions. You know, the company that just won the state contract for adaptive learning software." The pride in her voice was unmistakable. Mrs. Morrison then engaged me in a 20-minute conversation about education reform, while Eleanor watched with what looked like motherly satisfaction. "Your mother-in-law speaks very highly of you," Mrs. Morrison said as she left. "She called you a hidden gem the Prescott family was lucky to find, Later, during the family photos, Ethan's extended family treated me with a deference that had nothing to do with warmth and everything to do with a rapid recalculation of my value. His cousin, James, who had always ignored me, suddenly wanted to talk about a potential collaboration between his marketing firm and my company. "Maybe we can talk after your honeymoon," I said politely, with no intention of ever following up. But the most important moment came during our first dance. Ethan held me close as the band played our song. "You didn't just beat them," he whispered in my ear. "You freed me too. 32 years, Clara. 32 years of being managed and controlled, every decision filtered through their approval." He pulled back a little to look at me, his eyes shining. "I spent my whole life believing that their money came with chains. You showed me that the chains were only as strong as my fear of losing their approval. You showed me it was possible to stand up to them and win. We showed each other," I corrected, thinking of how his support had made my plan possible. "I couldn't have done this if you hadn't chosen to stand with me." As we danced, I caught glimpses of our guests over Ethan's shoulder. Arthur Finch raised his champagne glass in a silent toast. Megan was crying happy tears while pretending to fix her makeup. My parents were dancing nearby, and my father gave me a proud wink when our eyes met. 6 months have passed since our wedding day, and the changes have stuck. Our prenup is untouched in a bank's safe deposit box. Its job was already done. It wasn't about protecting us from divorce, it was the document that established our equality. Eleanor now calls before she visits, actually asking if it's a good time instead of just announcing her arrival. "Would Tuesday work for lunch?" she'll ask, respecting my time when I tell her I have meetings. The woman who once bulldozed every boundary now waits for an invitation. Richard regularly forwards me investment opportunities, genuinely asking for my opinion. His emails come with notes like, "Thought this might interest you," or "Would value your perspective on this." The condescension has been replaced by respect. Sunday dinners with the Prescotts are now monthly, not weekly. We set that boundary early, and surprisingly, they've stuck to it. When we do go, the whole dynamic is different. Eleanor asks about my company with real interest, and Richard discusses market trends with me as an equal. Our home, a townhouse in Beacon Hill that we bought together, both our names on the deed, has become a symbol of our partnership. It's not the modest apartment I clung to, nor the giant mansion his parents would have picked. It's something that reflects both of us. Sometimes I stand in my home office and look at the photo of Grandma Helen on my bookshelf, and I can almost feel her here. She lived her whole life letting people underestimate her while she quietly built an empire. She taught me that real wealth isn't about what you show off, but about how you use it when it matters most. The Prescotts learned that lesson the hard way. They thought they were ambushing a powerless girl who needed their son more than he needed her. Instead, they ran into someone who had spent years studying their playbook while hiding her own winning hand. My revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about forcing them to finally see me clearly. The prenup they tried to use as a weapon became the mirror that showed them their own prejudice. Those condescending smiles had been aimed at someone far more formidable than they could have ever imagined. And in the end, they had no choice but to acknowledge it. The greatest treasures are often the ones hidden in plain sight, and the opponents you never see coming are always the most dangerous. If this story of turning the tables on entitled in-laws had you cheering for justice, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Clara placed those financial statements on the table and watched the Prescott family's superiority complex crumble. What was your favorite moment of sweet revenge? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.